It was remarkable, bringing the continent to seek into the future a transformation of how energy is being supplied, how agriculture is being managed, how forest becomes an asset standing, not being chopped down. President Ruto, you talk about green industrialization for Africa being once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. What do you expect from finance, the discussion we have today, so this opportunity is realized? What is your vision? What is your ambition?
Thank you very much, Kristalina. And I associate myself with everything President Macron has said, especially in the space of where are we going to find additional new revenue sources for climate financing. The Africa Climate Summit brought African leaders together. And for a very long time, Africa has been in the corner of problems. We're trying to move Africa from being in the corner of problems to the corner of solutions. And we stated very clearly that we have ideas, we have suggestions, we believe Africa has the greatest stake in contributing to the solution around climate change. And we got ourselves here, this problem of climate change, because of energy, fossil fuel energy. We will get out of here again because of energy, renewable energy. And that renewable energy is in abundance in Africa. And that is why we believe that we are very well positioned to be part of the solution to the challenge we have today, so that, as Macron says, no country is left between making a choice between development or climate action. So we made a conscious proposition in the Africa Climate Summit. Number one, we said we are positioning Africa with our assets, that Africa has huge potential. We have 60% of the world's renewable energy. We have 40% of the world's minerals that can be used for transition. We have the largest, maybe 2/3 of the world's uncultivated arable land. We have the world's youngest population. So we have real assets that we can bring to the table to solve the problem of climate change and to solve the problem of development. And that is why we said three things are therefore very important. With our assets, we believe that the solution going forward is how do we tap into the huge green energy opportunity, potential and opportunity in our continent. We're lacking technology and we are lacking capital. And therefore, three things come into the equation. Number one, how do we unlock the resources that have been committed? Whether it is in loss and damage, and I'm very happy that we've made progress in the last few days, thanks to UAE and other partners. How do we then look at the international financial architecture? How do we empower World Bank? How do we empower the IMF to do more concessional funding? How do we reorganize their governance so that those countries that did not exist, many of them in Africa, when the IMF and the World Bank were brought into being, how do we get them to have a say? How do we speak to recapitalizing these multilateral development banks? How do we improve on liquidity? The subject SDRs President Macron was talking about. How do we deal with the real issue of exaggerated risk that is destroying African governments? You know, how do we de-risk African investments? And how do we bring on board finances from the private sector. And therefore, ultimately, we came down to green industrialization is a big opportunity. Big opportunity, why? Because we have the green energy. We have the green raw materials, whether it is bauxite, whether it is steel, whether it is iron ore. We can export very many green products out of Africa, whether we are talking about bauxite, aluminium, steel, green products to Europe in terms of food products. So Africa has the potential. We have the opportunity. We have everything that we need to power our green industrialization. And that is the reason why we are very clear about what is lacking. That is climate finance. And that is why we are willing to go all the way to the launch we are going to make in this scope of a new framework, what we called in Nairobi a new global financing charter. We're going to have a global financing framework according to UAE, and we are going to have here another framework aligned, synergized, so that by next COP, we will have a new financial pact that brings on board resources. How do we collect additional resources? Is it tax? Is it carbon pricing? How do we leverage on carbon markets? How do we bring into the equation all the issues around natural carbon sinks, whether they are our forests, whether they are our peatlands, and majority of these are in the part of the continent we come from. So we believe that Africa can make a huge contribution with our assets if we were to agree on how financing can be obtained, and we are ready and willing to play our part, including making a contribution in the new financing framework.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Look, you listed all the assets of Africa. It is very clear there cannot be a prosperous world without a prosperous Africa. One asset I would add is leadership. It is fantastic to have leaders on the continent that have that vision that you just presented to us. We made a small correction at the IMF by adding a third chair to represent Sub-Saharan Africa. Problems are not solved, but we made a small installment.
For which we are grateful.
I want to turn to Rishi Sunak. The UK took the lead on placing climate finance at the center of discussions in COP in Glasgow. And the UK has been fantastic in promoting innovations to make the financial capacity of multilateral development banks, of the IMF, go further than otherwise through guarantees and other forms of innovation. So what next? Where do you see the UK making further contributions in the financial arena? Prime Minister Sunak.
Thanks, Kristalina, and it's been good to work with you on this topic for some years now. I guess let me start by saying that I recognise the frustrations about the limits of development and climate finance, right? If you look at it, developing countries pay 5 times more to borrow on private capital markets. Investment in renewables is growing at an extraordinary pace, but right now, I think less than 2% of that is going into Africa. And, you know, President Ruto has argued previously, others have, that that situation is completely indefensible. And I agree. I think we would all agree with that. And that's why the $30 billion Global Climate Fund that's been announced is so welcome. It's why the Global Climate Framework is so important. And I'm pleased that the UK is supporting that. But if we want, Kristalina, as you said, this bigger, better financial system that's going to help us get the SDGs back on track, deliver all the Paris agreements and actually reverse biodiversity loss, then I think there are probably three areas where we need to focus, and it overlaps a lot with Emmanuel said earlier. I think the first is we just need fresh thinking about how we do this. And that's why a while ago we pioneered the use of climate resilient debt clauses, so that climate disasters don't become economic disasters, and those should be standard across the board by 2025. They will make an enormous difference. We need reform of the financial institutions. You and I have spoken about that in the past, and we support a conditional capital increase for the World Bank, and Ajay is sitting there because where we can stretch these balance sheets to make a difference, we should, and I know that we will, which will be welcome.